In this video, I want to spend a little bit more time discussing the changes that we're seeing in alpha. Now, we got a huge announcement yesterday. I also made a video kind of going over my first initial reactions to the Brewmaster changes specifically, but I didn't spend any time at all going over hero talents, class trees, and any other kind of implications that we're seeing. So with like further analysis from the community as well as myself, I wanted to talk about a few of the things that I have noticed, along with like talking about Blizzard's general philosophy going forward in terms of tanking, because I think it's kind of interesting and I'm excited to see how it pans out. If you missed the video where I talked through all of the talents and I showcased kind of what the tree is going to look like using icons and messing around in Photoshop, go check out that video. But in this video, I want to spend time talking about specifically the class tree along with the hero talents. So starting off with the class, the one thing that I didn't notice until I was editing my video yesterday is that Rising Sunkick no longer exists for the Brewmaster monk. So why is this important? Well, Rising Sunkick has always been an interesting ability because it doesn't provide much, but it does provide some. Rising Sunkick always felt like a filler, but it always hit fairly hard. So Rising Sunkick, what it's doing for your rotation, especially in this current season, is it's giving you a global, a little bit of breath to catch back. What am I saying? It's giving you a little bit of time to like catch your breath in combat, giving you energy back. So for example, if we like keg smash, blackout kick, tiger palm, our energy is about 50%. We keg smash again, we're now sub 40, which means we can't even keg smash again, even though we don't have a charge. But what Rising Sunkick does is when you do end up spending a bit of energy, Rising Sunkick gives you that global to have something to fill with while you regain your energy. Blackout kick is the same thing. Rushing Jade Wind is the same exact thing. With the removal of that, while I think some people are rejoicing with the removal of Rising Sunkick, it does mean we're losing out on an ability that does a fair bit of damage, and we're losing that kind of balance in our rotation that's allowing us to maintain a healthy equilibrium of energy. A lot of fancy words to say, it make rotation feel good. So I'm a little sad to hear that Rising Sunkick is going, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's an ability that I think could have function if Blizzard explored it for the Brewmaster like it does for Windwalker and Mistweaver. Instead, they're gutting it and replacing it with Stagger. So if you're a Brewmaster, you're naturally just going to have the Stagger in this position anyways, and it's going to default to. Now, what makes it weird is that Fast Feet is also now affecting Rising Sunkick and Spinning Crane Kick, which means that we're not going to benefit from it unless they're changing how Fast Feet works for Brewmaster specifically. I don't have access to Alpha, so I can't even check, but I found that kind of interesting. Now, something that I didn't notice yesterday either, until it was pointed out to me on stream, is that they are actually removing Diffuse Magic and Dampen Harm. So these talents are no longer going to exist. And I noticed this because I was looking through other tanks, and there seems to be a defensive pruning across the board, which I don't think is a terrible thing. I think defensives have gone too far. I think their healing philosophy change is relatively good. Obviously, I think a lot of healers would disagree with me there, but I think more power in the core kit and the throughput of a healer in its like raw value compared to being intrinsically based on how powerful their cooldowns are, as well as removing defensive usage puts more agency in the hands of your healer in some sort of content. At least that's the theory, which I like. So Dampen Harm is going away. The only thing that's going to be there now is Dance with the Wind and Yu'lon's Grace in replace of Diffuse Magic. Now, if you're not aware, Yu'lon's Grace is actually pretty strong. It used to be better. They cut it, they nerfed it by 50% back in the day. It used to be 2% of your max health up to 20. Now it is 1% up to 10, but it's still pretty powerful. And it's a nice way to have increased resistance to magic damage because you're not always taking magic damage. So generally the absorb will stack up to 10%. You'll take a large magic hit. It mitigates a fair portion of that. And then you kind of have this like ebb and flow where you don't take magic damage for a while, then you take a big hit, and then you don't take it for a while, then you take a big hit. And it actually works out pretty well. Now Dampen Harm was also removed. So you only have Dance with the Wind for 5% extra dodge. I don't know if players will actually play this because Dance with the Wind isn't necessarily good. It's not bad, but in not all scenarios is dodge important. For example, certain raid fights, having dodge doesn't matter. Elusive Brawler should still exist. I'd imagine that our mastery is not changing because I haven't seen any notes anywhere. So 5% dodge, a little bit better in Mythic Plus, not so great in raid. But I found that really interesting. Now they are keeping the Diffuse Magic element of being able to reflect dots back at the attacker with Diffuse Magic here, which is affected. It's basically baking it into Fortifying Brew. So we're no longer going to have a 60% magic DR. It's just going to be your Fortifying Brew, which is a 20% DR. And if you spec into Diffuse Magic, it directly affects Fortifying Brew, which is like a nerf, a pretty big nerf. The other problem is that Blizzard hasn't done a good job lately at putting abilities in the game that you can actually diffuse off. This season, I think there's only really two that actually make an impact. First, it's going to be in Arakara. The very last mobs here, these drones, they apply this tainted blood debuff. If you let this stack up really high to 15, 20 stacks, and then diffuse it, it'll diffuse it back onto one of these mobs, essentially killing it. Like it does so much damage in higher keys. The only other diffuse magic tech that I can think of off the top of my head is later, or I guess at the start of the Streets dungeon for Glyph of Restraint. It applies a pretty nasty damage over time effect that does arcane damage over 16 seconds. You can diffuse this back onto the attacker, dealing actually a fair bit of damage in that key. So these changes I think are good, but it's obviously removing a lot of the defensive power of the Brewmaster. But I also think diffuse magic is very niche. It's the same argument you can make with spell block that they removed the last patch with Warrior, where you have to know kind of the intimate details of a dungeon, what does magic, what doesn't, to actually use diffuse magic in any kind of like meaningful capacity. If you don't know how to use diffuse is a very pointless button. You can make the same argument about spell reflect, but I think spell reflect is kind of niche in its own right. And then dampen harm also has an issue where it's a fluctuating damage reduction from 20 to 50% based on the size of the hits. Dots are always 20, larger hits can be up to 50, but sometimes can be in between there. So them removing those abilities are better, where it's like Fortifying Brew is a 20% DR and a health increase. So there is a lot of defensive agency going away. The only thing that we're going to have in our kit now essentially is Fortifying Brew and the Black Ox. So defensively, it's going down. But some people have pointed this out. I noticed this yesterday. I didn't talk about it though, because honestly, I forgot to. It was in my notes. But if we go back to the spec tree, which I told you guys I wouldn't talk about, they are buffing Shuffle. So according to this tooltip, it's increasing the effectiveness of our stagger by 120%. Holy shit, can't fucking talk. In our current tree, it's only 100%. So is stagger becoming more powerful, or is this something that they're implementing earlier on as a tuning knob to make sure our stagger is always around that 80% mark? We don't know. But if Shuffle increases by 120% and it's going to go beyond 80%, most of that defensive power is actually going to be baked into your natural stagger, which should make the class a lot easier to play for new players. So these are all good changes. So that's what's going on in kind of the class tree. Most other things in here are staying the same. We're still seeing access to, your detox is in the same spot. Calming Presence, Transcendence is still there. Ring of Peace. I would have liked to see a AoE silence, but it's fine. We definitely need some help in the utility department when it comes to CC, especially for Mythic Plus. But outside of that, I think the tree's mostly staying the same. We are losing Clash. Unless it's becoming a baseline ability, it's only going to be rushing reflexes. That's probably the only other notable change that I've seen in here, outside of the removal of Rising Sun Kick and the removal of those defensive nodes. Now, one other thing that I mentioned yesterday in my video was that we are losing Weapons of Order. I believe I was incorrect about that. I don't think I like missed anything. They didn't announce that Weapons of Order was going baseline, but people have pointed out and speculated that there has been an update to how Shado-pan works. And the update is the capstone. So currently on live, if we take a look at Shado-pan, your capstone is Wisdom of the Wall, which is after every 10 flurry strikes, you gain a buff that has some kind of effect, whether it's giving you crit, verse, shadow damage, or mastery. Now, if we look at this build, Wisdom of the Wall, casting Weapons of Order calls upon a Shado-pan fighter to assist you for its duration. The Shado-pan's fighter's damage is increased by 1% per flurry strike you've triggered before casting Weapons of Order. So the idea is that it is actually now a baseline ability, and it is no longer in the talent tree for that reason, which actually opens up some different possibilities when you're looking at the spec tree with things like Press the Advantage versus Blackout combo, and some of these other kind of talents on the right-hand side. I'm interested to see if it's actually baseline. I think people who have access to Alpha probably know the answer to this, but that's interesting. Plus, if you look at Windwalker, Weapons of Order is actually here as well. Chi costs are reduced by 1, and Blackout Kick reduces the cooldown of affected allies. So I'm not sure if they're adding it to the Windwalker kit, and that's what's being displayed here for Shado-pan, or if it is truly baseline for players, but Weapons of Order might not be going away. It's just being kind of reworked and reintroduced. Now, we still don't know what the additional talents are in the Master of Harmony or Shado-pan tree, but everything is looking good. Now, Master of Harmony is mostly staying the same. The only thing that is changing is their, obviously, Overwhelming Force. Because of Rising Sun Kick being removed, it is no longer going to, well, you can't use it, so it can't do damage in a straight line. This is a slight nerf to Overwhelming Force because when you were playing with Rising Sun Kick does so much damage in its window. Like, it's doing 1.84 mil to 1 targets, and now because it's cleaving for 25% additional damage, it's then hitting 2 targets for half the amount. So Rising Sun Kick was a good bit of burst damage and damage through Overwhelming Force. But also Blackout Kick still does a lot of damage, as you can see here. It did 1 million, so Overwhelming Force then does a fair bit of overall damage. So besides that, I mean, everything else is looking pretty kosher. You know, I'm excited to see where the class actually kind of gets developed into. I would like to see, personally, from what I've seen so far, well, I need to see how the class fares against just damage now that it has less defensive buttons. As long as the playstyle is still rhythmic, will be good. The one thing I will say, because I've talked about it already in terms of energy economy with Rising Sun Kick going away, probably moving towards a direction where we're going to be playing Breath of Fire again. So people who were all upset or confused why we weren't playing Breath of Fire, it's probably coming back in the next patch. It is a staple of the kits, and beyond that, we're not only getting Breath of Fire, but we're getting fire tornadoes and additional fire damage through exploding kegs and exploding keg volley. Like, it's going to be a good time. Now, people are theorizing, like, Keg Smash is going to be bad, and, like, there's some big tuning. I'd like to see tuning before we start making assumptions about Blackout Kick. Hit Scheme is being removed, which means that Blackout Kick's no longer increasing Keg Smash damage. But they're also buffing Stormstout/Keg by 50% instead of 20, so there's a lot of, like, moving parts that I want to wait to see kind of tuning numbers on, and of course, it's early alpha. Even moving into beta and late beta, changes can happen all the time, tuning can happen, so don't get caught up too much about the numbers. We're more focused on the playstyle. So that's all I have for this video. I am excited to keep seeing what content kind of develops over the course of alpha. I'm going to report things when I can. Currently don't have access, so I can't really get into the game and show you guys. So let me know what you guys think down below, and I will catch you all in the next one. Peace.